What are some of the common signs that parents may pass down this intergenerational trauma to their children? I know we and I talked about a little bit about this, but especially when it comes to the topic around shaming and pointing fingers. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, and shame is one that comes up quite often in studies. Shame often in many religions is even used as a way to discipline, right? Or to kind of show boundaries. And when we use shame too much, then that can damage self-esteem in kids. And especially in the ages between 0 and 7, when kids are really operating in the theta brainwave frequency, which is really everything, all the information is going straight into our subconscious. And at that age, if we're using a lot of shame, right, that can really have a knock-on effect later on in life, where in their core, they feel like they've done something wrong or that they're constantly have to prove themselves. So yeah, shame is one that comes up quite often as a way of creating boundaries, which is not the most effective. It can be effective and it can work as long as the right balance is brought in with the parents, and the parents are really coming from a place of love and they're balancing it with love. Then it can work in a non-detrimental way. A
lot of stuff I learned also from Brene Brown, who talks a lot about shame as well. And through her landmark research, she talked about how the children and teens and adults that were shame based on how they were brought up. When they grew up, they had mental illness, they were more drug addicts, sex addicts, alcoholic, everything, mental issue applies because they can't stop shaming themselves because they got trapped into that loop.
And the way to think about shame is, the way you can spot it in kids is, shame is when you're embarrassed about what others think of you. Guilt is what you have inside, what you think of yourself. And shame is when it's from the outside. A little bit of shame is natural, right, in this world. It's just that, finding the right balance and perhaps not using it as a parenting tool. In terms of intergenerational trauma, the way I think what we can see a lot, the way, I spot intergenerational trauma, or there's also a great author out there, his name is Mark Woolen, and he brought out a book recently called It Didn't Start With You, which is on the topic of generational trauma and how to resolve it. It was actually recently nominated on the Oprah's recommended book list. So it's a great book. You should definitely check it out. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Woolen. And what he talks about is core language. Core language meaning verbal language and non-verbal language. And that's where we can spot if there's still remnants of generational trauma, because sometimes we use words in the subconscious. We're providing little hints in the words that we use. Some people will use the word crazy a lot, or they will use things that are related to shame a lot, right? Specific words, and those specific words can tell us if they're like little breadcrumbs of like, oh, there's still something here maybe that they have picked up from the past. Triggers are a great way to see if there's still something there. Another way is nonverbal behaviors, and that's more related to patterns. And so patterns are a sequence of behaviors that get repeated more than twice or once. And when we see kids or individuals repeating certain type of behaviors, perhaps they're doing it unconsciously, and it's a coping mechanism for something.
Absolutely. I remember, I think about half a year ago, I was at Starbucks, just doing my work, and a young mother and a 2-year-old came in. The young mother was talking to her friend, and the whole time that the 2-year-old just learned how to walk, and he's walking around, and he grabs her car keys, and he's moving the chair, things like that. And what struck me the most at that moment was the mom's verbal comments. She would say like, "How dare you steal my car keys?" To a 2-year-old, maybe that car key is just it's a toy, right? It's something he can play with. He's not trying to steal it. So I see the shaming response as a pattern. And then as he's moving the chair around, like, "How dare you? You're such a greedy person. How many chairs do you need?" Jokingly or not, but those verbal words actually really does matter.
Yes.
Everything you talked about, right?
Yep.
So I can only imagine how she was brought up. Again, I'm no judgment per se. I'm not here to judge. I'm just looking at specific pattern. And
yes.
Through that awareness, when we see these triggers and we see this pattern, we can start changing ourselves.
Yes.
And that's where we really break our ceiling, how we get to the next level of parenting.
I love what you say is non-judgment. It's just what is. Because once we judge it, we're going back into the cycle.
Exactly.
And once we stop judging it, we can stop it and move on.
Yeah. How does shaming and and resilience play a part, or how does shaming play a part in resilience?
You know, what's really important to systemic is that everybody is included. We have the family system. Okay, that's a family system. That's a system we're born into that you cannot leave. You can check out, but you cannot leave it. We're bound to it by blood and DNA and a collective conscious. There's a collective conscious within our family system. And what we see in family systems a lot is people get excluded because maybe Uncle Jim was an alcoholic, or another family member had an affair, something, right? They did something which the family system didn't like, and they get excluded. It's a way of shaming, but this can have really not good effects on descendants, because the collective has a really strong pull that everybody is included subconsciously. Even to go that far that some descendants will maybe even identify as this family member who has been excluded, as a way to include everybody. Inclusion is really, really important, and we see exclusion happening a lot, which is detrimental to the family consciousness and system. And a way to build resiliency really is to, especially now, right, we live in a world that's rapidly changing, right? It's very difficult for kids out there and for parents. I think one thing, the way we can work with our family system and build resiliency is to acknowledge the past and take wisdom from it. Even the bad things that happened, or the pain that was incurred and maybe that lived on in some remnants, not to blame it, but to look at it as now it's wisdom, and it gives us new meaning to be in this world. And when we do that, that's one way of building resiliency. It can actually give us more strength and support.
Now, what about sibling rivalry? Because that never happens, right? With my brother, we fought all the time.
Yes.
So how does parents address sibling rivalry and conflicts among children?
Yeah, obviously that's very common. Any part and parcel of growing up and learning how to be in this world. I think what's important is that, again, everybody is recognized in the family system, and you know, a lot of times if there is siblings rivalry, it could be something that they're seeing that's happened behind them, meaning above them through their parents or ancestors that were excluded. So it's always good to take a step back and understand, is this rivalry healthy? Is it non-healthy? And if it's non-healthy, what's happened in our family past that could be you know, leaving clues for these siblings to behave in such a way. How to overcome it is really to maybe talk about family stories in an empowering way. Talk about family members in an empowering way, right? So talk about all your different family members, that they're included. And so that inclusion can really signal to the siblings as well that inclusion is important in this system, and that's how we, for lack of words, that's how we roll. But another way is also in family systemic leadership. The way we look at things is that order is really important. So the order of, you know, the parents, then the grandparents, and the great-grandparents. It's always the mother on the left and the father on the right. And this order is really, really important and needs to be respected. When this order happens, this creates patterns. And this order can happen in a way of maybe the mother's overreaching on the child. Maybe the mother and dad relationship is not so good, and the mother is actually enmeshed a little bit with one of the children. And so that is creating this order and create poor behaviors within the family system. Another order is that so the older sibling comes first, right? And that is actually the sequence of order within the family system, and it should also be recognized and respected in such a way.
Wow, this is so powerful, because there's so many things, the dynamics around it. Because if a family member gets left out and feeling, because you talk about inclusion, right? If a family member gets left out, typically, and we see this all the time when we volunteer at the group of the youth leadership summit, the leadership group, you know, all the teens, what they really want, the kids, what they really want is to be heard and for us to show presence. And I talked to a lot of these teens and also my friends around, because I went on to research after that. how many times actually parents are sit down and actually listen to our children? And when we don't have that, when we don't listen to our children, then they feel like excluded. And this is why they join gangs, they join a bad peer group, because they feel like they're part of that group, right? Because they just want to feel belong.
Yes.
Wow, this is so powerful.
Yeah, if you want to have key metrics to see if your system is healthy, belonging, number one, everybody has a sense of belonging, is recognized, included. Number two, the exchange is balanced. Give and take is balanced. Nobody's taking more than they're giving. Number three is order, that the order is respected. If these three metrics are in a good place, then the system is in a good place. And the way we can reach potential is also if we consider the evolutionary force, which is maybe technology or maybe COVID. If we take the best from this type of force and we add it to the system balance, then the system can be in a really, really good place.
So let's go ahead and wrap up. I'm going to ask you one last question. What is the one important message that you want to share with every parent out there?
I think the one important message is that we should always start with looking within ourselves first. A lot of times what we see is that, the kid has an issue and we want to fix the kid. But if it's really understanding that it didn't start even with us. It started perhaps some generations back. And when we have that self-compassion, non-judgmental view to acknowledge, I think that goes a huge, long way. And when we resolve the things within us from in our place, it actually sends waves through the entire system, forward and back. And the more we can tap into what's happened behind us and their wisdom, the more our kids and our creations can shine.
Oh my God, I love that message. I'm so honored to have a moment to interview with you and talk about this. This is such needed work and such deep work that many of us need, and especially if you just look at all the war that's going on, even the past 50 years, there's war left and right, and just a lot of people are traumatized, and how that affects next generation. So
yes,
again, we're super delighted to have you. And Chris, thanks for all your wisdom and your insights. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. So until then, live purposely, love passionately, and serve the world by spreading love and joy.